Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's reading with myself and pdmac. We are picking up where we left off last week with chapter 13 and 14, so we will just jump right into it. Chapter 13, Gwen. The mages from the great library stood in a line facing Havengard. Gwen glanced at them, then turned her attention to the stone walls that protected the castle. She shifted her stance impatiently as she waited for Kalen to contact his sister. Despite her initial aggravations with the man, he had quickly proven his worth and had become her trusted right hand. She looked over her shoulder. Lyra still hadn't returned. She told Kalen she was going to find food, but that had been a few hours ago. The dragon should have been back by now. Gwen was worried something had happened to her and offered a silent prayer on her behalf, hoping that she hadn't been caught by dragon hunters. Good news, Kalen said as he approached. I hope so, Gwen replied. Corlys says Connell and half his forces will be in position outside of a tunnel that leads into the city. They're waiting for us to draw attention to ourselves. You mean we haven't already? Gwen smirked. Where's the other half of his army? They're heading for the west gate, led by someone named Lorcan. Gwen vaguely remembered him from the meeting in Hedens. Good. Torian will be hard-pressed to defend his castle. What's wrong? Kalen asked. Nothing. You look uneasy. What is it? Lyra still hasn't returned. I'm worried about her. She's a dragon, Kalen scoffed. She can protect herself. You should be worried about us. His words made Gwen realize she was thinking foolishly. He was right. Lyra was fine. Probably. I guess we'll have to attack without her. How many archers do we have? Not enough, Kalen said. 24, maybe. Do you think they can hit anything from here? No. Kalen didn't even hesitate with his answer. Then we need to get closer. How far can your shield stretch? I've never tried covering more than 2 people, he answered, but I like to push boundaries. Try to shield the archers. I'll have Menjing and the others get closer. If the archers can take down some of the soldiers on the wall, we're better off. Once we blast a hole in the wall, it's going to get bloody. I'll do my best. Kalen jogged off to collect the archers. Menjing, Gwen shouted. The tall man looked at her as she strode over to him. We need to get closer to the wall. Is that going to be a problem? That is no problem, Menjing said. How much closer do you want us? Gwen eyed the distance. 100 feet or so? That'll put us within the range of their archers, but ours can't reach them from here. Do not worry for us. We are ready. Menjing told the woman next to him, who passed the word down the line. They began walking together, moving ahead as an organized unit. Gwen waited for Kalen and the others, then marched with them. You should be at the camp to direct your army, Kalen remarked. You shouldn't tell me what to do, Gwen replied. Besides, I'm not a leader. The people we chose are better equipped than I am. Kalen opened his mouth to argue, but Gwen gave him a hard stare and he kept quiet. As soon as the mages were within range, a volley of arrows came hurtling at them. One of the mages raised her arms, and the arrows flashed brightly. The wooden shafts incinerated. The steel tips showered to the ground, their pattering reminding Gwen of a hailstorm. The archers grouped behind the mages, and Kalen motioned to them. They readied their arrows. Our turn, Kalen said. Fire! The return volley was pitiful in comparison, and a third of the arrows didn't make it halfway to the wall. Those that did struck an invisible barrier and simply fell from the sky. Gwen looked at Kalen and shook her head. We can try again, he said. Let's alternate. Magic, then arrows. Gwen whistled. Menjing and the others raised their hands toward the castle. There was a moment of silence, and then a chorus of runes was spoken. The ferocity of the magic made Gwen wince and back up a few steps. Lightning bolts, balls of flame, spikes, glowing orbs of energy, and many other magical bombardments lit up the sky. Gwen held her breath as the barrage struck the wall, except none of the spells landed against the wall. Like the arrows, they hit the unseen barrier and fizzled out. Menjing glanced back at her, his uncertainty evident. Gwen nodded at him, and they fired off their spells a second time. Again, the magical attacks were thwarted by the barrier. Gwen rushed ahead to join Menjing. What is that thing? She asked. Anti-magic, he answered. It's the work of a sorcerer, maybe a wizard. Anti-magic stops arrows, too? It would seem so. Should we retreat? No. We need the focus on us until Connell is ready. Keep attacking, but not all at once. And reserve your strength. The real battle won't start until we're inside. Gwen turned to leave, then paused. Can you tell if the person casting the anti-magic is on the wall? Mila might be able to. She has a rune that gives her far sight. More arrows filled the sky. The mage who dropped the first volley raised her arms and incinerated them again. Menjing summoned the woman he'd mentioned, and she hurried to the front of the line. Can you see the one who shields the castle? Menjing asked her. Mila looked toward the castle and spoke the name of a rune. Her eyes went completely black. A few seconds later, she blinked lazily, and her eyes returned to normal. Yes, the magic flows from a prestige near the middle. He's surrounded by soldiers and 2 mages. We need to get rid of him, Gwen said. Let me talk with... A roar drowned out her words as she whirled around, looking to the sky. Lyra had returned, along with 3 other dragons. 2 were blue, and the third was jet black. They flew overhead and continued toward the castle. The blue dragons opened their mouth, and blasts of lightning flew forth. Lyra breathed fire, and the black dragon spewed a sizzling wave of acid. A cheer rose from among Gwen's camp. Magic arced over the walls, followed by a barrage of arrows. The projectiles bounced harmlessly off the dragons, but a few of the spells struck the blue dragons, and they screeched in anger. Lyra bellowed loudly. The dragons turned away from the castle and landed at the camp. Gwen looked at Minjing. Continue assaulting the walls, but remember what I said. Reserve your strength. She ran back to the camp, leaving Kaelin with the archers. Lyra was conversing with the other dragons as she approached. You're back, Gwen said, looking at the dragon's chest for signs of wounds. Lyra's scales were flawless. Gwen's eyes widened in surprise. I went to find food and found allies, Lyra said. She lifted a claw and ran it over her scales where she'd been wounded. Your magic is powerful. There's no scarring at all. I wasn't even sure if it would work, Gwen admitted. You have done a great service to me, but also for my kind. I am still able to bear eggs, and once we have the city back, I will help restore our numbers. Gwen wasn't sure what Lyra was meant about having the city back. She was just glad to see the dragon was healed and hadn't been captured. Menjing sends, there's a sorcerer on the walls that's keeping us at bay. We need to make some noise so that Connell can enter the city unnoticed, but we need to find a way to get past that barrier. Lyra looked toward the castle and hummed lowly. The barrier cannot be removed unless the sorcerer breaks the spell or dies. I vote death. As do I, Gwen replied. We can drop a few people on the wall. The rest will be up to them. Won't the barrier keep you from getting close enough? The barrier blocks magic, but not living things. As long as you humans don't mind free-falling a short distance, you'll be fine. Gwen smiled, knowing just the person to lead such a risky endeavor. I'll get a team ready. She returned to where Kaelin was and told him the plan. His face lit up like a child on Yuletide. Please let me go, he begged. The job is yours, Gwen said. Pick a few people to go with you. Once you land, do whatever it takes to get rid of that sorcerer. If you can at least break the spell and make him retreat, that's better than our current predicament. I'll do that and more, Kaelin said confidently. Be ready for my signal. What's the signal? Gwen asked. You'll know when you see it. Gwen wasn't sure she liked that answer, but she decided to trust him. She just hoped he didn't let her down or die, as Tobias had. Kaelin pulled the archers back to the camp since they were useless and handpicked 7 people to go with them. Lyra was confident that each dragon could hold 2 people while flying near the wall. The small team armed themselves and climbed onto the dragons, all but Kaelin, exuding a strange mix of excitement and fear. He was enjoying himself immensely. The dragons leaped into the air, their powerful wings pushing them higher and higher. Gwen rejoined Menjing and his group, deciding to add her magic to the diversion. As one mage finished throwing a spell at the wall, the one beside them would go next. It kept a continuous barrage hitting the barrier while also preventing the enemy from shooting any more arrows. Tinchich, Gwen shouted, sending a bolt of lightning from her palm. Shadows passed overhead as Lyra and the other dragons sped toward the walls, diving down sharply at the last moment. Gwen couldn't see much, but she did spot the small forms leaping from the backs of the dragons and landing, thankfully, atop the walls. The mages continued their assault, changing the aim of their attacks toward the lower portion of the wall in case Kaelin was successful. The minutes ticked by, and Gwen tried not to worry. Kaelin was a capable mage and an exceptional fighter from what she'd seen, but his stone skin rune didn't make him invincible. The sorcerer is gone, Mila shouted. Dead? Gwen asked, but Mila shrugged. He's no longer at the wall, but I can't say if he's dead. The barrier should be down now. All together, Menjing rallied. This time, Gwen summoned the lightning and the fire runes back to back, adding her magic to the chaotic mix of the other mages. Every spell struck the wall. The camp behind them cheered again, and Gwen allowed herself to be optimistic. Now that Kaelin and the archers had dealt with the sorcerer, where were they? He was smart enough to stay out of the way of their magical attacks, but where would he go? The entire city was crawling with Torian's men. She gritted her teeth and pushed the growing doubt aside, throwing herself into the magic. They needed to blow a hole in the wall to allow the army through. Despite the combined power of the runes, the walls merely blackened under the assault. They weren't making any progress. One of the mages pointed and shouted something unintelligible. Gwen looked, seeing nothing at first. Then movement caught her eye. The porculus over the gate was rising. Gwen's eyes widened. Kaelin was opening the gates. Gwen sprinted back to the camp. To arms, she shouted, not sure if that was the correct thing to say. We march on the city. The army was small and untrained, but they drew their weapons and shouted war cries. They were ready, Gwen knew, ready to deliver vengeance for all the years of tyranny at the hands of Torian and his evil followers. Gwen grabbed a sword and was about to lead the charge when a sound from behind their camp stopped her in her tracks. Her heart felt like it dropped into her stomach. The ground began to tremble, and another sound overtook the first. What is that? Someone yelled. Another person turned and pointed. War horns!
Chapter 14, Connell. Madeline? Connell cocked an eyebrow in doubt. I don't believe it. Where is she? Gone, Corlett flatly affirmed. Last anyone saw of her, she was heading to Havengard. I bet if you ask the scouts, they'll tell you the same thing. Are you sure? She didn't say anything? Yes, Corlett sniffed. She said it was time to get back to where she belonged and then started walking up the road to Havengard. Walking a good pace, I might add. You didn't try to stop her? Story asked. I couldn't. Why not? He frowned. Because she's more powerful than I am. Okay, satisfied? She crossed her arms and glared at him. Story's frown deepened, and he turned to Connell, hooking a thumb at Corlett. What's her problem? Still processing Madeline's departure, Connell shook his head. This doesn't make sense. She destroyed Fearon's army. Why would she do that? Just to make me believe she was on our side? It wouldn't surprise me, Story ruefully observed. Those poor fools. All those years of training, weeks and months spent away from family, only to be used as toys for someone's blind ambition. He turned a hard eye on Connell. When the time comes, and I pray it comes soon, that Torian comes to you in chains and begs for mercy, remember his crimes. He gave no mercy and deserves none. The same applies to those who willingly chose to serve him. Just like a dead tree can't grow again, they must be ripped out at the roots. Connell shifted a glance at them. This goes no further. I want no one else to know except Lorcan. What? Carla burst. The woman's a traitor. She had you hoodwinked. He's right, Story sharply said, pointing a finger out here at her. Now be quiet, woman. You know nothing in military matters. What good would it do to tell soldiers who are about to fight and possibly die that the mage they trusted was the traitor? Is that how you inspire people to follow you? And speaking of you, what makes you think they won't believe the same thing about you? Corla's eyes popped wide. But I'm not a traitor. Oh, so you say, Story coldly replied, then swept a hand at the assembled armies of men and dwarves. Tell that to them. Corla swallowed and blinked in understanding. If anyone asks, Connell said, looking directly at Corla, Madeline's gone on a mission per my orders. No elaboration, just that she's gone because I have her doing something for me. You don't know what? Then change the subject. Understood? Yes. She sighed in frustration. That's yes, my lord, Story corrected. Corla glanced away so she wouldn't have to look in his eyes as she said, yes, my lord. Story stroked his beard and he mused aloud. She knows our strength and our position. And about our dragons, Corla added. Them too. Our element of surprise is gone. Not entirely, Connell responded. Anyone see Drewston and Miner yet? Not yet, Corley answered. Connell curled a hand at them. Come on, let's go find Lorcan and the others. After explaining Madeline's disappearance, Lorcan and Story increased perimeter security in addition to sending out patrols. Drewston and Miner arrived while they were issuing orders. Connell explained the situation. Madeline's gone and our presence here is compromised. Gwen's committed in battle to the east. We have to attack to take the pressure off her. You two know the area. What's the best avenue of approach to Avangard? The fastest way is straight up the main road, Miner replied. Not exactly what I had in mind, Connell said. If Torian knows you're here, Miner continued, what does it matter where you attack from? It would be nice to have at least one surprise, Connell sighed. You do, Drewston said with a slight smile. We brought some friends with us. Out of the darkness, 5 figures emerged, 3 women and 2 men, all dressed in the garb of huntsmen. Lord Connell, Drewston said, beginning the introduction with the women. This is Dareth, Tesney, and Amsir. These 2 are Ellis and Gowan. As each was introduced, they gave Connell a respectful bow. Dareth was a striking, svelte woman with a crisp facial features and long black hair. Tesney was the buxom brunette with a handspan shorter than Dareth. Amsir was the same height as Tesney, with blonde hair tinged with emerald highlights that seemed to shimmer in the night. Ellis was tall and muscular with a thick neck and close-cropped hair. And then, though a head shorter than Ellis, Gowan's broad shoulders and brooding face gave him an imposing presence. 2 things were unique to all of them. Their eyes, coal black with pupils like the occasional flicker of simmering coals, and the numerous runes imprinted on their skin. There are 7 of us here, Drewston said. 4 more standing by to employ where needed. One more thing that ought to be mentioned, Mynheer said, glancing quickly around to see who was within earshot. Motioning Connell and the others to close in, she lowered her voice and said, Dareth says there's a way into the city and then into the castle. She motioned Dareth to join the group. There is an entrance, Dareth repeated. As far as I know, it has been used for many decades. The last time I was there was before Cameron's grandfather was born. How old are you? Corla blurted, earning her glance from the others. Sorry. How do you know about this entrance? Story asked, suspicious. Dareth is Princess Dareth, Drewston answered for her. Her parents ruled in Havengard before the hunting. She will rightfully rule again when the time comes. How long will it take us to get to the entrance and then to the city? Connell asked, his hopes rising. I will lead them, she regally replied. It should not take long, provided your soldiers are strong. It is through the mountains. Sounds like dwarf territory, Story grinned. It is, Dareth said, for dwarves carved it for us an age ago. The hallways and caves are large, so an entire army of dwarves can easily pass through. But it's been some long time since I walked those hallways. I've never forgotten my home. This means splitting our forces, Lorcan warned. I know, Connell pensively nodded. But it also means getting someone into the city and castle without them knowing. He peered intently at Dareth. How far is it to Havengard? You can be there well before dawn if you left now. How long from here to Havengard for those not going through the mountains? 6 hours. Connell thought quickly. We attack at dawn. Story and his army will go through with Princess Dareth through the mountains. Lorcan and the remaining fine forces will continue the avenue of approach. He shifted his attention to Drewston. I'd like to split your group between the 2. Agreed. Mynheer and I will remain with Lorcan, along with Tesney and Ellis. Amsir and Gowan will go with Story. What about you, my lord? Lorcan asked, already knowing the answer. I'm going with the Story. Both Lorcan and Story were about to argue when Drewston spoke. An excellent idea. That would get the king's son inside the city before Torian realizes it. I have no doubts that there are enough in the city who are ready to rebel. What about me? Corla interrupted. You go with Lorcan, Connell said. He'll need mage help as soon as Torian sees the army. Though disappointed she wasn't going with Connell, she was also keenly aware that Torian's mages were far more powerful than she was. Even Madeline was more powerful. Suddenly feeling inadequate, she meekly nodded and tried to blend in with the others. If we leave now, Dareth said, Story and his army will have a few hours to rest before the battle. Connell turned to Lorcan. You know better what to do than whatever counsel I could offer. As soon as the sun's rays hit the rim of the mountains, attack. He stretched out a hand, grasping Lorcan's hand. We'll meet up in the city. Hopefully we'll have the gates open by the time you get there. If not, improvise. Watch yourself, my lord, Lorcan replied with a firm handshake. Once Torian discovers you're inside the city, he won't stop until he finds you. And your sister, Drewston added. Torian is just a man, Connell snarled. He needs to worry that I don't find him first. Turning to Story, he said, Don't worry, I'll stay out of your way. We serve you, my lord, Story nobly answered, hoping Connell would be true to his word. Then we better get going. While Lorcan gave his soldiers an hour's rest, Dareth led Story's dwarven army along the road to the northeast, a road that would eventually connect with the main road out of Havengard that went due north to the human kingdom of Tol Kragbjorn. Amsir and Gowan lagged behind towards the end of the dwarven army, scanning the area and occasionally drifting off, then reappearing. Walking beside Dareth, Connell noticed she moved with fluid grace, even at the pace they marched. "Why are you so intent on helping us?" he said without thinking. "There are so few dragons left. It's dangerous." She cast a sharp look at him. "Havengard was my home long before humans took it over. Will you return it to us, or will we have to fight you too?" Startled at the brusqueness, Connell replied, "Hadn't really thought about it. I've been a little busy of late, and to tell the truth, hadn't even thought about what happens after Torian's gone. But I do know threatening me isn't exactly endearing your cause to me. The way I see it, there are 11 of you left. Humans and others eliminated the rest. Seems to me that your threat of continuing the battle only ensures your complete elimination." That caused her to stutter step, but she quickly recovered. They walked in silence for a bit before she spoke, though it seemed an effort to be polite. "You're right, of course. I was wrong to imply any such violence. But it's true that we are at your mercy, hoping that you will do what is right and honorable and restore Havengard to its rightful owners." "So a kingdom within a kingdom," Connell observed. "And what else will you demand? How much of Isentol will you claim belongs to you?" "Now see here," she snapped. "Isentol was ours long before you humans took it over." "And who do you take it from?" Connell shot back. "And are you saying there was no one here when dragons decided, hey, this looks like a good spot. Why don't we build a city here?" "So you admit Havengard's a dragon city?" "I'm not arguing that dragons had dwarves build Havengard. I wouldn't even ask if they were threatened or volunteered. But it does cause me to wonder what treasures dragons had that they didn't have taken from them and someone else to use as payment, if that's what happened." Dareth's nostrils flared. "How dare you impugn? Come down off your high horse, princess," Connell interrupted. "Or did you forget that I am a king's son, and when I gained my throne, a king? My family reigned in Havengard for over 100 years. 100 years, when no one believed dragons still existed. We can talk claims to this city and the kingdom all we want, but the truth is, I have more resources at my disposal than you do." Dareth's mouth clenched, and she stared straight ahead. For the next hour, as evening's light slipped away into the darkness, neither spoke, and Connell wondered if he hadn't stepped over the line, that perhaps Dareth was leading them to a trap. But then logically, she'd still have to have his and Gwyn's support to defeat Torian. It was when Dareth abruptly stopped that an idea he had germinated began to blossom. A half moon's light gave shape to the forest on both sides of the road. "We're here," Dareth said, pointing into the forest to the right. "Follow me." Connell continued to contemplate his idea so much that he blindly followed Dareth, dodging trees, crossing small streams, and clambering over rock formations. The trail she blazed continued to climb. An hour later, she pressed it onto a wide rock shelf covered in vines. Hands on hips, she shook her head. "I can't count the number of times I came out here." She tugged at several vines and pried them apart. Connell and the others pulling and prying to give them space to get the army through. When enough space was created, Dareth plunged into the darkness, followed by a flash that lit a torch on the wall. "How'd you do that?" Connell said, impressed. "I'm a half druid, remember?" she lightly replied, lifting the torch out of the wall holder and handing it to a nearby soldier. Torches lined the entire hallway, light only enough to find her way. Soon enough torches provided dim light, showing the ceiling of the hallway was a good 50 feet above them. Connell immediately wondered how long it took to carve this from the stone of the mountains. "This tunnel will get us into the city," Dareth explained. "I will get us close to the entrance so that we may rest before the attack." "Lead the way," Story grinned. Standing inside the mountain and seeing the work of his ancestors filled him with the comfort only a dwarf would understand. Connell caught with Dareth. "I have an idea." "Yes?" "I will return Havengard to you in return for your help." "You already have my help." "Not this time. What I mean is, how much of Isentol was yours?" "About half of it," she answered, her hopes beginning to rise. "Which half?" "Does it matter? Human towns now occupy all parts of the kingdom." "True. However, my thought is this. To start off, You reclaim Havengard. Obviously, you don't have enough dragons to enforce your presence. However, over time that will remedy. But until then, you will need help. So enlist anyone who wants to stay. However, it will be dragon law that rules. Okay. As dragon numbers continue to increase, you expand over a specified area that has been designated as the Dragon Kingdom. In the meantime, since the seat of my kingdom is no longer in Havengard, it will need to move to elsewhere. Likewise, I'm losing a good chunk of my kingdom, so I need to make up for that loss. How? She looked at him and cocked an eyebrow. Tir Monarch. What about Tir Monarch? You will help me take Tir Monarch. You're going to conquer another kingdom? Her frown deepened. Tir Monarch had been under Torian's spell for years. My family was murdered, and Tir Monarch did nothing to prevent it or complain about it. The present king is still under Torian's thumb. This will be justifiable reward for betrayal. Dareth tilted her head to the side as she led them past corridors, through large vaulted rooms, and up and down wide sets of stairs before slowly nodding. I agree to your proposal, though frankly the affairs of men are a little concerned with dragons as long as we are left alone. Good, we can hammer out the details later. For now, where does this come out? It comes out to the southwest side of the city. The city is built up against the mountains. She went on to describe the layout of the city. One street ran the length of the city walls, stopping well before the citadel. There were 7 main thoroughfares that fanned out from the citadel all the way to the walls. With the citadel as a focal point, descending concentric rings of streets connected the main thoroughfares. The castle is much like the city, with wide hallways, doors, archways, stairways, and anything else you could imagine for a dragon to move comfortably in the castle. The castle sits higher above the city, and there are many levels within the citadel, arranged in concentric circles with hallways connecting each circle, just like the city streets. The throne room is in the center, a grand affair with a raised dais where the Dragon King used to hold court. It is the throne room your father and your grandfathers used. I do not know how Torian has it arranged, but it will be hard to catch him unawares because he will see you before you can get close. Not for the last time, Connell wished his highwayman days had brought him here. It would have made things a lot easier now. Wonder how Lorcan's doing. When we begin our attack, I will have Gawain and find out where Lorcan is. Thank you. To Connell's surprise, Torgoth came running up. Story asked how much farther. We're almost there, Dareth answered, leading up a flight of wide stairs that 30 humans could have walked side by side. True to word, she stopped on a broad platform before a set of grand double doors, almost as high as the cabinet ceiling and not quite as wide as a set of stairs. The city lies on the other side of these doors. We can rest now. A few moments later, Story came up and gave the doors a doubtful look, especially at the door handles well above the reach of any human or dwarf. Who's going to open the doors? Don't worry, she soothed. I'll make sure the doors open when needed. Connell glanced around as the dwarves settled in groups and quietly chatted or stretched out where they were. How do we know what time it is? Story shot him a smug look. A dwarf always knows what time it is, especially inside the mountains. We made good time. We got another hour and a half before we launch the attack. I've got a regiment ready to open the gates for Lorcan. Amsir and Gawain came up and drew Dorothy aside to chat quietly. Amsir says that Lorcan's army arrives unnoticed. How does she know that? Connell sputtered. There's more than one secret way into the city, Dareth cryptically replied. The attention is all to the east, where your sister and her mages have engaged the magic of Torian's magical forces. Let's pray his attention stays there, Connell muttered. For the next hour and a half, Connell tried to relax, but his pent-up nerves wouldn't let him, and he was actually relieved when Story said, it's time. Amsir, Gawain, and Dareth joined to stand before the doors. Give us room, Dareth commanded. Lots of room. Connell, Story, and the dwarves scooted back off the platform to fill the stairs up to the edge. Connell saw the reddish glow of the runes on their forearms begin to shimmer, brighter and brighter until the forearm was a swath of a color. And then the transformations occurred as the human forms bumped and bulged and twisted as 3 dragons expanded into their original forms. Dareth was a large coal-black dragon with cobalt blue eyes and wings the color of shimmering onyx. Amsir evolved to just a little smaller than Dareth, an emerald green drag with eyes that colored liquid gold. Stout Gowan was a surprise, for he was almost twice the size of the other two, all muscle and power, his scales the color of dazzling amethyst, and eyes that blazed bright orange. A hush of wonder rippled through those who watched the metamorphoses. Jared stood on her hind legs and reached for the door handle, then turned to Connell and Story. Ready? Then let's do it. With a yank, the doors silently swung wide.
It's getting crazy. All right. That wraps it up for this week. So be sure to keep your eyes peeled for next week's video, and we will pick up where we left off. Thank you for listening.